LIVE live.
Oh,
We'll be live in a few seconds.
I'm alive now.
I'm trying to save you all from horrible embarrassment.
You can't embarrass me. I'm already embarrassed. Isn't that nice? What? I see his lips moving, but I didn't hear him.
He said, what did you say?
What?
He said, what did you say?
I didn't say anything. He was talking. What did she say? Huh? What did she say? Daddy. Oh, honey. What?
Hello.
Are you smoking?
Guys, give us help over here.
Mom. Better put it up so I get home.
Did they actually?
Said it was broke somewhere. I don't remember.
At the mention of your name,
Visit my grandmother. I
This looks like a tribunal table, doesn't it? Or a jury or something.
Hey, if you're going to say something, speak up and quit mumbling.
Dad, I'm sorry. You have to scream at the top of your lungs to overcome the sound.
What?
You have to scream at the top of your lungs to be heard with this music.
What?
How do you mean? Peace. I don't know. Halfway.
Oh, that's real peace.
You know, poor Sarah, she really went through a lot. Sarah, with Abraham constantly telling people that she was I mean, that.
Well, she was.
Well, I know, but I mean, that poor lady. I feel so bad for her.
On the other hand, I'm not entirely sure he was wrong.
Oh, he was way wrong, way out of bounds. He's more afraid of dying than than he was protecting his wife. I mean, his own skin was way more valuable to him. Yeah, I wonder if back.
It sounds though it's almost along the lines of let's break it to them gently.
Now the thing I don't get, okay, the thing that's weird to me is that Pharaoh
Shalom,
and
everybody.
Abimelech
Let's go ahead and get started. We have eaten and we're satisfied. So the Torah says, "You eat and be satisfied. You will bless Adonai your God for the good land He has given you." So let's do that. We thank you for the food. Thank you for the blessing of being full and satisfied. In Yeshua's name, we thank you. Amen.
Wayne, you're going to have to volumize a little more.
Volumize. Okay. I get the
Mike.
microphone.
Isn't it right there?
No, that's the
Oh, I think
Different
that is the
microphone.
microphone.
That's the mic for the
that's the live mic.
that's the mic for the broadcast. Test. Okay. So yeah, this is Midrash for our study. So a couple things from the Torah portion itself. The era, our Torah portion this past week, is it may not be easily seen just from looking at the word era, but it actually comes from the word ra'ah, to see. It's in a passive voice meaning here, and he appeared in this Torah portion. But who is the one who is appearing? Of course, it's Yah. And the to him is not identified in our text directly, but it's Avraham. We see that in the text there later as Avraham is speaking. Where did he appear? He appeared in the trees of Mamre. Who's that? Well, one commentator suggests he appeared in the trees to demonstrate that just as an old tree still bears fruit, so did Abraham bear fruit in his old age. So yes.
More like a comment than a question. I always thought that Mamre was a place because of that verse. But later I remember reading in Genesis that it implies that it's not the name of a place, but the name of the person who owned the place.
In fact, let's ask this question. Who, not what, was Mamre?
You're getting a little ahead of us.
No, that's right. No, that's exactly right. You might think of the trees of Mamre, the oaks of Mamre, the terebinths of Mamre. Might sound like it's, Chula Vista or something like that, but it's not. It's somebody who is. There's a person. We see that in the text actually, as you said in Genesis, Bereshit 14. We see that in the story of Lot. They took Lot, Abram's brother's son who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods and left. And one who had escaped came and informed Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner. And they had a covenant with Amram.
Someone's got the car in
Sounds like we're in a forest. There's some logging going on. Oh, it's not chainsaw.
Trimming, mowing.
General
Does he have a
You sure it's a
mask?
weed whacker and not a wacky weed?
Arrest that man. He's falling off here. All right, sorry. Continue.
Need to cut that hair so I quit falling off.
Eddie's.
Now, if he was airborne, it'd been Addie's in the harness. If he was airborne, he should say Addie's in the harness.
At ease in the harness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dangle. Pretty much.
According to tradition, why was Abraham sitting at the door of his tent in the heat of the day?
Because he was tired.
To catch anybody before to make sure that nobody would pass him by without getting
Because he was still in the pain.
Because it was too hot and
That's right.
and it was in the shade.
Don't hit me when I say this. Tradition says he was in the heat of the day because of his recent circumcision.
Ah,
I don't know, I would want something more comfortable than the heat of the day after that.
Or I would say came to pay him a visit. And why would Yah pay him a visit? Because of B'chor Cholim, which is the idea of visiting the sick.
Yeah.
The other part of the question is, the other part of the question is in the second verse of the portion. It asks, the second verse I think reads, and he looked up and saw the man. The question is why was he looking down? Because of the circumcision. Again, don't hit me when I slice that. Okay. So the Talmud says it was the third day from Abraham's circumcision, and God came to inquire after Abraham's health. So the idea is that the idea is that on the third day is the most painful time of it, and that's when Yah came and showed up and asked about Abraham's health. So just as the Almighty visits the sick, so must you visit the sick. It's the idea from traditional sources.
So how did he have the strength to run and get the calf and all that?
Because Abraham.
Abraham didn't run after it. Somebody else did.
He
Yeah,
said
right there, he ran.
Talked to Sarah.
And then he went
I don't
and
think
got
I would've been able to.
I don't think I've ever seen the word ran so many crammed, so many.
That kind
Might
of
have just
seems
said,
like
fetch
putting
the
an
fatted
Aesop's
calf.
favorite on it.
Fetch it.
Yeah.
He just said we were lying.
Did he really run or what quickly?
No, he said fetch lavash.
He wasn't hurting too bad.
Evidently.
So what is the idea of cholim? It is, in short, is vision sick. And Judaism teaches that it is a mitzvah to do that. It is an act of tzedakah or righteousness, even outweighing Shabbat. As it's Shulchan Aruch teaches that it is visiting to all ethnic and religious groups, and it is the purpose of doing so is to alleviate suffering, and the visitor receives the ill person of 1/60th of the suffering. So you need 60 people to get rid of all the suffering.
Actually, wouldn't that be 60 people to relieve the suffering?
That's what I said.
Oh, I thought you said 6.
No, 1/60th times to get to 1 is 60. So it'd be pretty crowded, and most hospitals will not allow you to bring 60 people in to visit, particularly in COVID days. So, according to traditional sources, Yah was performing the mitzvah of visiting the sick, and that we're not told the purpose of his visit, but it becomes obvious that after Abraham was circumcised, he appeared to him to inquire of his health. According to Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, is it permissible to visit the sick on Sabbath? That's the question.
You already said yes.
Well, I said it other place. I didn't say Shulchan Aruch said to visit, did I?
Oh,
Or on Shabbat. I get what I did say. I did say it, yeah. So Shulchan Aruch says it's definitely is one of the things that you're allowed to do even on Shabbat is to visit the sick. There was actually a dispute in this between Shammai and Hillel. Which one do you think would have said no, and which one would have said yes?
Shammai would have said no, and Hillel would have said yes.
Ding ding! We have a winner. Good job. So the mitzvah, according to traditional sources, a mitzvah of performing chesed or kindness overrides prohibition of experiencing distress on Shabbat, and so under all circumstances you may visit a sick patient on Shabbat. Sages teach that the Shekhinah resides at the bed of an ill patient, and so prayers are more beneficial from the sick person's bedside. Well, that's again, a tradition, not necessarily biblical truth, but it is a tradition that you should know. Okay, so that's really all I have on the comment of the Torah portion. So let's go to Matityahu, chapter 5, shall we? So, very famous verse, blessed are the poor. Some translations read humble in spirit. Shem Tov Matthew. Shafli is the word for humble there. Jutale and the Shita both will translate to poor, as does, of course, the Greek texts. But it seems certainly possible to me that Yeshua's since you see the phrase humble in spirit or broken in spirit a couple times in the Tanakh and both in in Yeshayahu or Isaiah, that Yeshua was deriving his teaching from the same kind of phrase, humble or poor in spirit. And that's possibly why Shem Tov Matthew has it the same. Look at it, it's not the same word exactly, but it's the same root word. You can see there for shafli or ushafel for humble in Isaiah 57:16. 66:2 uses a different word, broken, but I think broken in spirit is probably very similar to humble in spirit as well. But so what's the question kind of comes up then? Well, what does it mean to be poor, humble in spirit? What are your thoughts on that? This is where you get to speak now. FYI.
It could mean in mourning.
Okay.
Did you say morning? Morning. Not like in the morning, but like
Time of mourning.
when you're sad.
In how he treats people. Look what he did for the three guys who didn't know who they were. Jumped up and had them prepared a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a complete lack of any sort of arrogance or conceit or pride.
When he sits beside someone else, he don't mind sitting in a lower chair.
Okay.
Well, maybe kind of like I know it sounds terrible, but like a well-trained dog or a well-trained animal doesn't care if it's master or if it's whoever's in charge of the human gets the better food, better spot, more warmth. It's been broken. It's been trained. It's humble. It's not.
Well, first couple of verses of Matthew, I mean, it says, "How blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. How blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. How blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. How blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." So it could be some parallelism between poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, and hungry and thirsty for righteousness. I'm not sure if there are true parallels in that sense. Next one is those who show mercy, pure in heart, who make peace, and who are persecuted because of their pursuit of righteousness. So, this is, it's somewhat, I guess you could say, speculation in that sense. There's one thought. Before we go there, though, I'll just say that we've talked about it, I think last year, a couple weeks ago. I really like 5 verse 6. How blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. I like that passage because it's the idea of yearning for or desiring that, desiring righteousness, hungering and thirsting for righteousness. It doesn't say those who are righteous, it says those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So even if you are not acting righteously, but you are hungry and thirsting for it, you have the chance to change your behavior and hunger and thirst for it, even if you can't necessarily attain the purity that you'd like to attain, so to speak, or the fullness of your walk isn't as pure as you'd like. You're hungering and thirsting for it, so it still gives you hope to keep moving forward. But the question might be, well, let's take a look at what is the parallel passage in Luke on this subject. It seems to be from Luke 6:20, which it reads a little bit differently. What's the difference between those two? You see there in 5:3 and 6:20.
It says blessed are those who are poor, not necessarily poor in spirit, but
Right. So Luke doesn't use the ruach side of that, the in spirit side of that. He just says, blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. So the question might be, does the second rule of Hillel, Gezerah Shavah, which is the equivalence of expressions, or an analogy is made between two separate texts on the basis of a similar phrase, word, or root, does that apply here? So what would be the similar phrase? It's all the same except for the words
Yeah.
in spirit, because both are, I think kingdom of God is a parallel with kingdom of heaven. King Elohim is a parallel with kingdom of heaven. And so it's blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. So those are the same verses or parallel verses. And so is it possible that poor in spirit just does mean just plain poor? Well, that's a question, I don't know. But it is part of traditional teaching about that, the rules of scriptural interpretation from Maimonides, Rambam, that's been passed to us. But even older than that, it's the second rule of Hillel, of course, who lived in the period even before Yeshua's ministry on the planet. So does it apply here? No, I don't know. That's kind of an open question. Yes.
Okay, Luke says poor, Matthew says poor in spirit. I'm wondering if it is an equivalent, but looking at it from two different points of view. One is poor in the physical, and one is poor not having very much and desiring more. Kind of also a parallel with the one that you also mentioned, hunger and thirst for righteousness.
Yeah. Because Matthew has the hunger and thirst for righteousness, but we see actually in Luke is a little bit different. He kind of doubles down on it. Because a few verses later, Luke says, "Woe to you who are rich, for you are receiving your comfort in full. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep." And so it's instead of the blessings part, he takes the opposite view, the woe to part, and he brings out the rich. So my comment: many will find Yeshua's words here uncomfortable, but it does seem to confirm that Yeshua meant to the literal rich here, in contrast with the literal poor of Luke 20. Question mark. So as I said, these passages do make some people uncomfortable at times because it may be too close for comfort, so to speak. Further thoughts before we move on?
I've always found it interesting about the one where it says the meek shall inherit the earth.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very few people actually know what the word meek means. Most people take it to mean weak, and it's quite the opposite. It's power under control. Because when you meek a horse, you're taking a full-grown stallion and making it so that you can keep it under control. Because there is going to always be that power there. Jesus was meek. There was in no way possible that he was weak.
No, right.
He had the power of God within him all the time.
Yeah.
He just had it under full control.
I kind of like how the Complete Jewish Bible interprets the phraseology here. The meek will inherit the land. That's basically taken from Psalm 37:11. So it's the word Eretz. So it's in Hebrew it'd be the word land, and it could well be the land, like in the land as in Israel. Before we go too much further in this, I want to backtrack a little bit from our Midrash last week where we read Luke 6:1. Just kind of a highlight that we didn't bring out at that time was most translations modern translations today don't read like New Kings and Kings do here. Because it's a different source text, the Byzantine text, I think. There are other places that may have it as well. But the phrase, now it happened on the second Sabbath after the first, that he went through the grain fields, and his disciples plucked the heads of grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. I think actually, Wes, you read that last week, I want to say.
I think I did.
Yeah, sounds like, I think, because I remember hearing it in your text, or somebody read it. Maybe it wasn't you, I don't remember now.
Somebody read it.
Somebody read it last time and read it from a version that had it like this, the second after the first. So, as I said, not every version has it, but what does the phrase second Sabbath after the first mean? Second Sabbath after the first.
Could have been at a high Sabbath.
Ah, I think you are very, very warm. This is a commentary by Daniel Gregg on the subject. What does second Sabbath mean? His commentary is this: the first Sabbath was the first day of unleavened bread. The second Sabbath was the weekly Sabbath after the first Passover Sabbath. It was also called the first because 7 Sabbaths were counted after Passover. I think that's what's going on in Luke chapter 6, although it may be confusing for not for commentators, but for translators to understand. If they don't understand that part of it, it may have got left out of others because it doesn't, what does that even mean, right? What is second Sabbath after the first? Like some weird, just delete it. Possibly. Okay, so we did this question during the youth challenge. I thought that was kind of fun. No one answered D. I thought that we could get somebody at least.
Yeah, you would have got me, but you didn't ask me the question.
Right. So, building your house on the rock. Let's reread this passage because there are some very interesting. I think there's some pretty interesting things. So if you turn your Bibles to Matthew 7, 21 to 29.
Wow, is that not amazing?
So I'm reading here from the Teacher's Bible. It reads this way. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who do what my Father in heaven wants. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we expel demons in your name? Didn't we perform many miracles in your name? Then I will tell them to their faces, I never knew you. Get away from me, you workers of lawlessness. So everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who built his house on the bedrock. The rain fell, the rivers flooded, the winds blew and beat against that house, but it didn't collapse because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a stupid man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the rivers flooded, the wind blew and beat against that house, and it collapsed. And its collapse was horrendous. When Yeshua finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at the way he taught, for he was not instructing them like their Torah teachers, but as one who had authority himself. So my thoughts here are, doesn't this sound a lot like the prophet like Moshe passage in Devarim chapter 18?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly the last verse of that's on the slide. It shall come about that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. It seems like it's the same idea as that. We can read the whole section if you like. It is a section that is claimed by, of course, we'll see later that Peter and James both attributed the Devarim 18 passage as a prophecy about Yeshua, which of course is the way I would understand it as well. But the passage doesn't say, and this person is Yeshua. It's just, if you read it in chapter 18, again, it's 18, it's 15 through 19. And here reading from the Complete Jewish Bible, it says this: Adonai will raise up for you a prophet like me, this is Moses talking, from among yourselves, from your own kinsmen. You're to pay attention to him, just as when you were assembled at Horeb. You requested Adonai your God, don't let me hear the voice of Adonai your God, don't let me hear the voice of Adonai my God anymore, or let me see this great fire ever again. If I do, I will die. On that occasion, Adonai said to me, "You are right in what they're saying. I'll raise up for them a prophet like you from among their kinsmen. I'll put my words in his mouth, and he'll tell them everything I order him. Whoever doesn't listen to my words, which he will speak in my name, will have to account for himself to me." So it's the same idea, I think, is this: there's an accountability problem here. If you're not listening to Yeshua's words, you can't be Torah observant because you're not keeping Devarim 18. And that's what Yeshua basically is saying here, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, certainly there can be pushback on that. Is there any? Do you have any thoughts different, or did you agree or disagree with that?
The opposition has completely crumbled. All have bowed before the intellect.
Well, what I find most interesting is in verse 23.
Okay.
And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness in the English there, in the New King James, but I take that to understand Torahlessness.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's the same concept
So
here.
how can you read this word and still say keep Sunday? Bow down to the evergreen tree. I'm just curious.
Yeah. How can you read that verse and still say that the law in the Old Testament, we don't have to do that anymore?
I can.
Yeah, I've been starting to have this conversation with some people online.
Matthew 5:17.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Oh, yeah.
the reference that the translation here has is in Psalms 6, 8 or
It's not just
9 or
5:17, it's all the
8,
way through.
yeah.
where it says, "Get away from me, all you workers of evil, for Adonai has heard the sound of my weeping." So the idea from that is, get away from me, you workers of lawlessness, and this is Yah talking here. Ra'ah is the word that I think.
Did you say Psalm 6?
Nope, yeah, it did, Psalm 6, verse 9 or 8, depending on your translation.
Hear from me, all you workers of iniquity, for the Lord has heard the voice of my weeping.
So iniquity and lawlessness, there would be the
Yeah.
parallel.
Yeah. Man.
So it's in the psalm there, it is the word ra'ah, I believe it's evil there.
I find it interesting that the word Ra is the same as one of the gods of Egypt.
I think it's pronounced differently, but similar, I think, yeah.
I've always heard the god in Egypt pronounced as Ra.
Well, the English letter R doesn't necessarily give the word justice more, it's more guttural.
Well, if it's more guttural, that makes it sound more evil.
So, look, if you go back a minute, we're just reading from chapter 7, but look at Matthew chapter 6. Matthew 6:25. I don't have a slide on it, but take a look at it's a famous passage here. Matthew 6:25 and reading onwards. "Therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds flying about. They neither plant nor harvest, nor do they gather food into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you worth more than they are? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to his life?" I've seen this passage, speaking of like online discussions, and I've seen this passage twisted and used as an argument against keeping biblical clean or kosher. Because he says, don't worry about what you eat or drink.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be a twist, considering he didn't even say anything
Well,
like that.
If you take it,
Don't worry where your food's coming from.
if you take it in that tense, that means you literally don't have to care whether you're wearing burlap or denim, and you never whatever you do, don't even think about money, have no preparedness whatsoever. If you take it that way,
Well, you
clean and
have a
clean.
job.
Yeah. Well, I think worry is, I think thinking about
Anxiety.
worry, I think is different than being conscious of your surroundings. I mean,
The anxiety of it
Yeah.
is eating people up. I think that's
Yeah.
what's going on.
'cause
It's
I mean,
not about, it is not about food per se or clothing per se. It's the worry, that's the point of the statement.
Yeah.
Not about whether you're allowed to drink vodka in your underpants, right? Because that's the clothing part, that's the don't worry about what you drink part, right? So it should be fine.
yeah.
Well, we've seen what people will do if they are truly afraid, they will lose.
Well, I've kind of heard that in like casual conversation. I've kind of heard people quote that one, "Don't worry about your life," in reference to doing things that are unsafe. Like, well, you shouldn't worry about it because the Bible says not to worry about your life. And you're like, that doesn't mean you go jump off a cliff or do something really stupid with your life. I mean, I don't think it's
It means don't worry about don't worry
like
about where your life's going.
Yeah, but
Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. It's going to be provided.
yeah,
Your life is going to be provided. Your food is going to be provided. Your clothing is going to be provided. God will provide.
yeah.
You may have to have a job so that so that it works out, but
Well, I mean,
God will
it's in
provide.
line with your life. I mean, I feel like it's almost godly to be careful with how you live and not to put your life in undue risk. But I mean,
the
I
Bible
know-
says we're the temple of the Holy Spirit. So, I mean,
Do not test your God.
yes, that too.
but, I mean,
Specifically under those same circumstances, Satan took him to the pinnacle of the temple and said, "Throw yourself off."
you know,
And
like
it's
the
don't test your God.
yeah,
So that literally defeats exactly what they were trying to twist it with.
yeah. But I mean,
If you're going to interpret the Bible, use other verses to interpret it,
yeah,
not just whatever you feel like.
that's true. In some ways, it kind of seems like I feel like the whole year of 2020. It seems like we've really seen this stuff put to the test. Like when people weren't like COVID has caused people to literally be in anxiety over all kinds of things. Their lives, and some of that I don't know if you could help, but I mean. I know that I've had a great deal of anxiety in the year 2020.
There's been a lot of anxiety, hasn't there?
Yeah.
I had none.
You're
I
lucky.
wasn't. No, I mean, I had. I was one of the few people that ended up having a job during that. I got on with the census, and the 2 days after I started, the second day they said, "Go home. We're shutting everything down." And then the census started sending me money every week, and it was like, "Okay, I'm taken care of." And I get to stay home, and I don't have to deal with people. 2020 for me was a wonderful year. I didn't have to deal with anybody.
I know. Well, I
Except
didn't
your
have.
own family.
Yeah. I didn't have
Yeah, there was
anxiety
that,
about,
but
COVID.
that
It's
doesn't
just,
give me anxiety. That
Things
gets on my
like,
nerves sometimes.
Will
but
there
not
be bread at the
anxiety.
store when I go today, or will I have to wait all day long lining out to buy dog food? Like anxieties like that.
Mhm. Okay, so let's look. I have a before we go to chapter 11. Is there anything you want to talk about in Matthew 8? I think there's a couple verses from that I don't have any comment on here, but or no, I'm sorry, no, I don't have slides on. Okay, let's go. Actually, before we even go this. Go back up to Matthew 7:12. Some have used this particular passage to say the Torah has been abolished because Yeshua said, "Always treat others as you would like them to treat you." That sums up the teaching of the Torah and the prophets.
Oh.
So therefore,
Well, so does love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, body, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It sums up the Torah and the prophets.
right. So
It's a summary, not a don't do the rest of it.
So I guess looking at this, if this is a summary of the Torah and the prophet, and Yeshua says to do it, it means what? You can't take away the Torah and the prophets because Yeshua said to do what the summary of it, right? It's like
I think
It-
maybe that,
ill thought attacks against Torah observance. it'll consider it tax. So as you might have known, the corollary was Hillel's teaching that predated it, in the sense of before Yeshua was on the planet, at least, obviously, who said, don't treat others as you don't want to be treated, which is kind of the opposite of that idea. It's the don't treat others as you wouldn't want to be treated. Yeshua says treat others as you wouldn't want to be treated. So it's the same shekel, different side. Okay. Children or deeds? Well, this is a bit of textual discussion in the sense that different translations read differently between even versions translated from Greek and versions, two versions translated from different Greek texts read differently, as well as the Aramaic Peshitta text reads differently from the Greek text. And we'll look at that in a second. So in a survey here, Matthew 11:19, the New King's translation has children. How does your translation read for 11:19?
Deeds.
Deeds, okay.
Works.
Works or deeds? Okay. So why does New King's read differently? Well, do you have King James, Earl? Or what is it? How does yours read? I think so. Say children. 11:19.
Okay. Son of man came eating, drinking. They say, look, a glutton, a wine bibber, a friend of tax collectors, but wisdom is justified by her children. But if you go down into the things, it also says works.
Okay.
Okay, I've got something that reads a little bit differently.
Mhm.
It says, well, the proof of wisdom is in the actions it produces.
Mine says the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her actions.
So the actions part, I think in both those translations would align with works or deeds in that text. So against children. Well,
And I like the way it's written here, the actions it produces, as opposed to,
so if you're looking at it from a Greek text, you have teknon or ergon. You can see at the bottom of the slide there. So it's definitely not a one-letter difference between a scribal error or difference. Ergon is deeds, ergonomics. Teknon is children. So it's obviously not a scribal error between those two. So what's the solution? How is that? How do you fix that? What's going on there?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Could that be a difference between the Textus Receptus and the Textus Vaticanus? I think the Vaticanus is Latin, but still.
It is the Alexandrian text versus the
Textus Receptus.
Receptus, yes.
So the Alexandrian text, which is one copy supposedly, and which comes from the non-inspired version, I should say, correct?
Well,
I mean, the NIV comes from the Alexandrian text.
most translations come from the Alexandrian text today.
Really? So is it Textus Receptus follow
Because-
Aragon, or does it follow Tekon?
Receptus has teknon, children.
Okay, so Aragon is,
So how do you come up with the difference? How did that happen? How come there's a difference there?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there an older text that's like Hebrew? 'Cause I'm pretty sure Matthew was written, at least partially in Hebrew.
Let's hold that thought for just a moment, please.
Okay. Am I getting ahead of myself?
yes.
Why is it
So,
brings out these things?
Are you thinking that, why is was the Alexandrian text, from my understanding, was found on a trash heap?
I'm like, stuff back there.
I don't know.
I can't comment on that. I don't know.
That's rumors.
I think that might be
That was his predicate.
looking more like what
Okay,
sometimes
well,
the old Syriac was that way in some ways.
Okay.
It was basically scraped off previously. Well, so might be hard to read on this one, but
What about the Dutile or the Shinto?
Right, so if you look in I think the answer here might be from the Aramaic Peshitta text, actually. Because if you look at those words there, Benah and Benay, there's one letter difference betwixt the two. So it's kind of what is known as this is a split word. Binya is how the Peshitta reads at 11:19, but the words there, Binah and Benay, Binah means building, to build, to work, whereas Benay means offspring or children, both in kind of Aramaic and in Hebrew.
Oh, because they're both a product. They're both
Uh-huh.
completed, finished product.
And so, using the rules of Aramaic grammar showing possession, both her works and her children would spell the same way in Aramaic.
So I had gotten ahead of myself.
Yes.
So what is it in the Shem Tov or the Deuteronomy version?
Let's
Which
take a,
should be in the Hebrew.
yes, it is. I think I don't have those open right now, but I can take a quick
The
look.
students are impatient.
Students are, what was it? The students are revolting. That's the term.
I'm not revolting.
It's
I may be
I took a
revolting, but
shower.
I'm not revolting.
I took a shower this morning.
There's a difference in revolting, right? Same word, different aspects.
People are
humor.
rioting, they're starting to riot.
We get that, right?
We're trying to squeeze the answer out of you first before you're ready for it.
Which is taken from the word revolution.
Yep.
As opposed to the other version, which revolting means disgusting and nasty.
Yeah, I'm not. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I am. And the reason I asked between the difference between Deuteronomy and Shem Tov is because sometimes I wonder if those were copied after a Greek text. Sometimes maybe, I don't know. I'm just curious because supposedly those were written fully in Hebrew, not from a Greek text, but they were written in Hebrew.
That's my understanding, that they're not translations.
Huh?
It's my understanding that they are not translations.
Okay.
Neither Deuteronomy or Shem Tov.
So is there a previous Hebrew text that has any of this in it?
Well, yeah, both. We do our Avinu, for example. That's taken primarily from, from Shem Tov and Deuteronomy as primary sources for that. The Hebrew text of Matthew chapter 6.
They lost it in the fire of 70 AD, and then again on the burning of the Alexandria. You never seen that movie from Nicolas Cage, have you?
Which one?
Oh,
I can't remember.
National Treasure.
Yeah, National Treasure.
He had to bring up National Treasure.
Only because of the burning of the text in Alexandria.
Yeah, well, the Peshitta
Only reason why I didn't know
description,
that.
as I said, Binyat is the Peshitta version. It's, the root word is aved from Deuteronomy, avedya. Recognize aved as being obedience or work or service. As in, aved is the work for, it's the same word for, they can use for work or service or even slavery in that sense.
What about Shem Tov?
Okay, just a second, we'll pull that up.
I'm patient. I'll wait.
Definitely way better than something that smells like White House. It smells like a dog.
I don't have one.
Essential oils.
Virtue or patience?
I don't have any shoes. Good slippers.
I don't stick to that. Every once in a while, I don't know what. If they get wet.
So does
then
revolting
actually-
mean revolt? When people start using revolting to mean nauseatingly bad because your stomach revolts, goes backwards.
I was under the impression that the term revolting, as in the peasants are revolting, not because they are nasty, but because they are rising up.
No, I mean, okay, that's
Comes
the,
from the it's its roots are in revolution
Yeah.
as opposed to revolting as in disgusting and nasty.
No, I know. I'm saying, I think
I
people
believe
start
the two
using the
words-
word
I believe
revolting
that-
to mean testing because there's some, because revolution, turn.
I was under the impression that it was actually two separate words with two separate meanings with two completely separate
Really?
I wish I could understand
histories.
enough to make.
I'm not sure that they were ever actually related. There are words like that.
My grammatical.
Piano.
Shocking.
Extremely under par.
That's Italian.
But that doesn't have, there's no other word in the world that sounds like piano.
It's Italian.
So Shem Tov has a completely different reading on that.
Very
That's what I
professional
thought.
kid, right?
It reads, "But the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and one says concerning him, he is a glutton and a drunkard, and a friend to violent men and sinners. So fools judge the wise."
That's completely different.
Wow.
Very interesting.
So that takes a much more accusatory.
Calling his
Accusatory.
accusers
Accusatory.
fools, not judging the wise.
Wait a
The word
minute, wasn't he the one
chacham
that
is
said
the
don't
word
call
there.
someone you full
Okay.
Wise man.
danger of
So in Dutale, it's Evan,
I don't quite get that whole.
but in Shem Tov, it's Echad.
No, and Shem Tov is a whole
Tov,
different.
it's chokmah, or chacham, rather.
Chokmah?
Yeah, well, wisdom, the wise. Chokmah is wisdom, chacham is wise man.
But
What
it's,
is the-
This
what
is
is-
plural, chokmanim.
So there is no works and there's no children.
well, it's a whole different way of saying the thing. Instead of saying wisdom is proved out by what by its works or its children, it says this is what fools say about
Fools
wisdom.
judge
It's a whole
wise.
different thought
Wise
line
man.
of saying.
Fools judge the wise.
Yeah.
I guess you kind of can get the same meaning in a way out of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
English is kind of
That's kind of
weird.
interesting.
Dutale, Shem Tov does not weigh in on the deeds versus
Yeah.
children.
It takes a whole different course.
I wish I could see more copies of Shem Tov compared to Dutale. 'Cause Dutale, I think, had a lot of copies.
Doodle.
Identifiable.
I don't really have any more to discuss. I know there's some things that we can do, and there's, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things in this text that are certainly worth taking a look at.
Are those kosher dogs?
Kosher hot dogs.
Nobody's mind is on anything tonight. Everyone's,
Wisdom has left the building.
yeah, wisdom is gone.
Well, let's pray. Well, thank you for allowing us to delve into your word today. Thank you for the opportunity to study. Thank you for the opportunity to read and study in the presence of our friends and to discuss the scriptures, Midrash on the scriptures. We thank you in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen.
So we do have a Havdalah set back there.
A what set?
Havdalah. You can set up for that.
Havdalah. That's kind of interesting how that goes.